An hour before the party, she said, "I have someone else." And I smiled and pulled out an envelope. It started as one of those nights I expected to be routine. Dressed up, show face, smile politely, clink a few glasses, and get through another event full of shallow small talk and stale hors d'oeuvres. The annual charity gala was never something I looked forward to, but Kelly loved it. She thrived in that kind of setting. Flashing lights, whispered admiration, little compliments dropped like breadcrumbs from people who didn't really know you but wanted to feel important by association. She called it giving back. I always thought of it as putting on a mask. I was straightening my cufflinks in the mirror when I saw her walk into the bedroom. She looked incredible. No point denying it. The navy blue dress hugged her in all the right ways, and she had that glow about her, the one she used to save for our date nights back in the early days. Lipstick just a shade bolder than usual, hair curled down over one shoulder. But it wasn't just her appearance that caught my attention. It was the bracelet. A slim, silver chain glinted against her wrist as she reached for a necklace on the dresser. Dangling from the bracelet was a small circular charm, barely larger than a dime, engraved with the elegant script of the Lakeside Grove Country Club. I almost didn't register it at first, but my eyes locked on it like it was a hidden message written in plain sight. "New bracelet?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Felt like the air in the room thickened. She paused just a second too long. Not obvious, but just enough for me to notice. Then the smile came, quick, measured, artificial. "Oh, this? Yeah. Gift from a client. I meant to tell you earlier this week, but it must have slipped my mind." "Nice of them," I replied, even though something about the way she said it didn't sit right. Lakeside Grove. She had always dismissed that place. Snobby, overpriced, outdated, her words, not mine. We used to drive past it on the way to visit her parents. Once, I offered to get us a trial membership just to try it out. She'd laughed and said, "That place is not for people like us." And she'd meant it, or at least I thought she did. The bracelet wasn't flashy, just tasteful. Almost deliberately so. The kind of gift you'd only get if someone really knew your style. I didn't say anything else. Instead, I filed it away in my mental drawer labeled things that don't add up. I've been putting a lot of stuff in there lately. We were already running late, and I didn't want to start the evening with an argument. Or maybe I just didn't want to hear a lie that I wasn't ready to confront. I went downstairs to grab our coats. Her black wool one was still on the hallway bench where she'd tossed it the night before. I picked it up, gave it a shake, and that's when it happened. Something fluttered to the ground. A small, pale yellow slip of paper. I bent down and picked it up. Parking ticket. I didn't need to read it twice. The words stared back at me like they knew what they were doing. Lakeside Grove Country Club. Issued 11:47 p.m. 2 nights ago. I stood there for a moment, holding it in my hand, feeling my heartbeat climb. I flipped it over as if the back might tell a different story. Didn't. 2 nights ago, Kelly had told me she was at home, exhausted, watching a documentary and sipping chamomile tea. She'd even texted me a photo of the mug on the coffee table and the paused Netflix screen. I hadn't questioned it. Why would I? I swallowed hard and tucked the ticket into my pocket. By the time she came downstairs, I'd already made a decision. I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. I needed to be sure. Not just suspicious, certain. The truth has a weight, and I wasn't ready to carry it if all I had were theories. As she checked her reflection in the mirror near the front door, I caught a glimpse of her purse, sitting open on the entry table. My eyes flicked to it. I shouldn't have. I know how that sounds, snooping, invading privacy, all of it. But instincts don't care about etiquette. Inside, tucked in a folded envelope, was a receipt. Dahlia and Pine, a high-end restaurant downtown. I hadn't been there in years, but I remembered the place well. Quiet ambience, dim lighting, candles on the tables, wine pairings that cost more than a car payment. The receipt was for dinner. 2 entrees, a bottle of Syrah, dessert. Total, $327.48. I checked the date. Same night as the parking ticket. I slipped the envelope back into her purse and closed it slowly, making sure nothing looked touched. My hands were shaking slightly, not from rage, but from that deep, stomach-sinking realization that something wasn't just off. Something was actively being hidden. I didn't say a word. She turned, gave me a smile that didn't reach her eyes, and looped her arm through mine. "You've been working late a lot lately," she said as we stepped outside. "Coming home later than usual. All those emergency meetings. You didn't even notice I made dinner 3 nights ago. I had to toss it out." Her voice was light, teasing almost, but there was something else behind it. A sharpness, a rehearsed tone, like she was steering the narrative before I even opened my mouth. I blinked. "Sorry. Things have been intense at the office." "Oh, I'm sure," she said, voice drifting somewhere between sarcasm and sincerity. "You know, if we're going to start keeping secrets, maybe we should just skip the gala and get couples counseling instead." It wasn't a joke. Not really. It was like she was preemptively accusing me, grabbing the wheel before I could drive the conversation somewhere dangerous. I recognized it for what it was: deflection. The oldest play in the book. Call out your partner before they call you out. Shift the focus. Plant doubt. I let out a breath and opened the car door for her. As I drove us toward downtown, I kept replaying the little details that had been piling up over the past few weeks. Her phone always face down on the counter. The new password on her laptop. The perfume that lingered on her jackets. Too floral, too different from her usual scent. A few nights ago, I'd even noticed her tiptoeing in just after midnight, claiming she'd been out late with coworkers. But her company had gone fully remote months ago. I didn't ask questions then. I didn't want to believe the answers. Now I wasn't so sure. The drive to the gala was quiet, too quiet, considering how animated Kelly usually got before events like this. Normally, she'd be double-checking our talking points, rattling off names of donors and board members, adjusting her hair in the mirror, obsessing over whether her lipstick matched the invitation envelope. But tonight, she just stared out the passenger window, hands folded neatly in her lap, like she wasn't really present. And me? I was behind the wheel, pretending to focus on traffic while my mind was spiraling through a slideshow of the past few weeks. Everything I had ignored, every tiny moment I had brushed aside in the name of trust. It was all rushing back now, louder than ever. Pieces that once felt unrelated were beginning to fit together in ways I didn't like. It wasn't just the bracelet or the parking ticket or the dinner receipt. It was the slow erosion of something deeper, something invisible, but unmistakable once you knew where to look. Like how she'd started showering at strange hours, late at night, early in the morning. When I asked about it, she'd laugh it off and say, "I just feel gross after sitting at a screen all day." But her company went fully remote in March. Her days weren't spent commuting or sweating through meetings anymore. They were spent at home in yoga pants, sipping oat milk lattes and half-watching webinars. And yet her wardrobe changed. Blouses and skirts that hadn't seen daylight in years were suddenly in rotation again. Heels, jewelry, new makeup palettes arriving in Sephora boxes she insisted were just samples. I should have asked more questions. I should have listened to my gut when it started whispering. But the thing about suspicion is it's easier to dismiss than to face. You don't want to become that guy, the paranoid husband, the one scrolling through his wife's texts at 2 a.m. or tracking her location like some jealous teenager. You want to be better than that, so you gaslight yourself. You call it stress. Say you're just being insecure. You bury the voice that's screaming at you, and you label it overthinking. But tonight, that voice wasn't whispering anymore. It was roaring. I remembered 2 weeks ago when I came home early from a client lunch. I'd forgotten my tablet and needed it for a Zoom call. Kelly was supposed to be home, working. Her car was in the driveway, but the house was dead silent. No music, no typing, no smell of tea or incense or the sound of her pacing around on work calls like she usually did. I walked in and called her name. No response. It wasn't until I reached the bottom of the stairs that I heard movement. Rapid shuffling, like someone moving quickly, quietly. By the time I reached the top, she was walking out of the guest bathroom, towel around her hair, claiming she just finished a shower and didn't hear me come in. The weird part? There was no steam, Just silence. And a scent I couldn't place. Not her perfume. Not her shampoo. Something male. That same day, our neighbor Mrs. Perkins, who, to be fair, was as nosy as they come, mentioned in passing that she had seen Kelly downtown earlier that afternoon. Looked dressed for a date. She'd said with a wink, not realizing how hard her words had hit me. I remember laughing. I even played it off. Probably just a meeting, I said. She works in PR. Always client-facing. But as soon as I got inside, I checked her calendar. It was blank. No calls. No appointments. She was working from home that day. No mention of being downtown. Still, I said nothing. I chalked it up to poor memory, maybe a coffee meeting she forgot to log. I wanted so badly to believe her, to keep believing in what we were. But what we were was changing. I could feel it. It's like living in a house where the floorboards creak in new places, the plumbing groans louder, and you keep telling yourself it's just old age. Until one day, a pipe bursts and ruins everything. I started remembering the changes in her phone habits. At first, it was small, turning her phone over when she set it down. No big deal. But then came the lock screen change. Then the Face ID stopped working. It's glitchy, she said. Then came the password switch, and suddenly, she was logging out of her laptop when she left the room, when she never used to care. I brushed it off. Everyone deserves privacy, right? But I also remembered the nights she came home with her clothes freshly dry cleaned, neatly bagged like she hadn't worn them at all. Once, I pulled a dress shirt of hers from the bag and caught the faintest whiff of cologne. Not mine. Not anything I'd ever worn. Probably from the cleaner, she said when I mentioned it. My trust cracked a little that night. I told myself it was nothing. But deep down, I knew that trust wasn't supposed to make you suspicious every time your partner wore something new. It wasn't supposed to feel like a gamble, like every explanation was a test of how much you were willing to believe. She started using the guest bathroom more. Said it was because the light's better for makeup. But the guest bathroom doesn't have better light. It has worse light, dimmer, older bulbs. I know because I installed them myself. But I let it slide. I always let it slide. I started thinking back to her sudden interest in going on solo walks. Late evening strolls, she called them. Just need to clear my head. I offered to go with her once. She turned me down so quickly it was almost reflex. It's my alone time, she said. Don't take it personally. I didn't. At least I tried not to. But even now, as I drove us past the twinkling lights of Michigan Avenue, the memory of her walking in one night with flushed cheeks and tousled hair made my grip tighten on the steering wheel. I had asked if she'd gone running instead of walking. She looked confused, then annoyed. What is this, an interrogation? That was the beginning of the shutdown. Emotional walls started going up. Every question was met with a counter-question. Every concern was controlling. Every attempt at connection became an accusation. I wasn't her partner anymore. I was her opponent in some invisible chess game I didn't know we were playing. And the worst part? She still smiled, still kissed me on the cheek, still said love you in the mornings like nothing was wrong. But something was, something big, and I could feel it growing between us, filling the space that used to be occupied by warmth and trust and shared plans. Tonight, the car was filled with that something. I glanced over at her. She was scrolling through her phone, subtly angling it away from me. Even now, who are you texting? I asked, immediately regretting how sharp it came out. She didn't look up. Just Maya. She wanted to confirm the table numbers for the gala. Maya. I knew for a fact Maya wasn't even in town. She'd posted a story earlier that day from Denver at a conference. But I nodded, said nothing. Let the lie settle between us like fog. By the time we pulled into the valet at the hotel, my head was buzzing. Every smile from her felt like a cover. Every compliment a disguise. She adjusted her dress in the side mirror, reapplied her lipstick, and gave herself a little pep talk under her breath, like she was preparing for a performance. And I realized maybe she was. The ballroom was already half full when we arrived. Laughter and soft classical music floated above the clinking of champagne glasses. A string quartet played near the grand staircase. Men in tailored tuxedos clustered near the open bar, and women in evening gowns glided between cocktail tables like they were born to this world of practiced smiles and strategic glances. Everyone looked effortless, like life had never hit them where it hurts. I walked beside Kelly, but we felt like two separate bodies moving in parallel, close enough to touch yet miles apart. She was radiant, I'll give her that, the kind of beautiful that could make strangers pause mid-conversation. And tonight, she carried herself like she knew it, like she wanted to be noticed, wanted someone in particular to notice. As we checked in at the welcome table, I felt the familiar sensation of playing a role. Husband, partner, plus one. The man standing behind the woman everyone admired. I smiled at the greeters, shook hands with a few familiar faces, and offered the same recycled lines I'd used at these things for years. Yes, work's been good. No, we haven't had time to travel. Maybe next spring. But under that rehearsed charm, my mind was scanning the room, looking for something, someone. I didn't even know what exactly until I saw him, Ryan. He stood near the far end of the room, laughing with a group of donors in front of the bar. Tall, polished, just the right amount of expensive cologne. He was the type of guy who knew how to own a room without saying much. I'd met him before, once, maybe twice. He worked in marketing at Kelly's firm. Younger than me by a few years, with the kind of clean-cut arrogance that made women laugh too loudly and men grit their teeth. Kelly always said he was harmless. Ryan flirts with anything that breathes, she once told me. It's just how he is. Don't read into it. I didn't read into it back then. Now I couldn't stop reading everything. As we moved farther into the ballroom, I let my eyes track him subtly from across the room. He hadn't seen us yet, or at least not me. But then he smiled. Not in our direction. No, his gaze locked onto something just behind me. Kelly. It was quick, just a flicker of recognition. But I saw it. The moment his eyes lit up, his posture straightened, like something in him had just shifted. She hadn't even looked at him yet, but it didn't matter. You could feel the electricity. Then she saw him, and that's when I knew. The way her face softened, the way her lips parted slightly, the way her fingers reflexively smoothed her hair like she wasn't even aware of doing it. People don't respond like that to coworkers. That wasn't professional recognition. That was int asterisk Macy. Hey, she said, a little too breezy, nudging me lightly. I see someone I need to say hi to real quick. I'll find you in a minute. Before I could answer, she was already moving. Not toward the silent auction tables. Not toward the event coordinator or her supposed friend Maya, who definitely wasn't in Denver like she'd claimed. No, she was walking toward him. My legs carried me toward the corner of the room, near the silent auction table, but my attention was locked on them. I stood beside a display for a weekend getaway in Napa Valley, pretending to examine the bid sheet while my eyes followed every movement of theirs in the reflection of the ballroom's tall, curved mirror. She reached him. He smiled wider. She laughed at something he said before he even finished saying it. They stood too close, too relaxed. Then he leaned down to whisper something in her ear. Her head tilted back as she laughed, her hand resting briefly on his forearm. Familiar, easy, confident. I was still trying to convince myself it could be nothing when he turned slightly, and that's when I saw it. A faint smudge on his collarbone. Lipstick. And not just any lipstick. The exact shade Kelly had reapplied just moments before stepping out of the car. I remembered the way she blotted it carefully in the mirror, the way she smiled and asked if it looked okay. It wasn't subtle. A bold berry red she usually saved for nights when she wanted to make a statement. It was now stamped, clearly, unmistakably, on Ryan's neck. I stopped breathing for a moment. I wasn't watching a maybe anymore. I wasn't catching the tail end of a coincidence or misreading body language. This was it. This was confirmation. I don't know how long I stood there, staring. Long enough for my heart rate to return to a strange, frozen rhythm. Not fast, not slow. Just still. Mechanical. Detached. I was no longer wondering if something was wrong. I was no longer playing out theories in my head. This was reality. Plain and brutal. The woman I married. the woman I defended to friends when they raised quiet eyebrows, the woman I built a life around, was standing across the room laughing with a man she had been *mate with. Maybe not right there in that moment, but recently enough for her lipstick to still be on his neck. I stared at her as she adjusted the strap of her dress and tucked a lock of hair behind her ear. She glanced toward the crowd, maybe looking for me, maybe not. She didn't see me. Not yet. I saw everything, though. Every movement, every signal. I should have felt rage, jealousy, shame. But all I felt was clarity. The kind of clarity that strips away everything else: noise, fear, love, denial. I saw it all as if I was standing outside my own body, detached, observing, like watching a movie where you already know how it ends, but you can't look away. I turned and walked slowly toward the opposite side of the room, forcing myself to move deliberately. Calmly, greeted a colleague, nodded at someone from our church group, picked up a glass of sparkling water from a passing tray, even though my stomach felt like it was tying itself into knots. The pressure behind my temples was building, but my face remained composed. My jaw relaxed, my hands steady. I was floating inside my own skin, and no one around me could see what was happening beneath the surface. Kelly eventually reappeared beside me, smiling. "There you are," she said, brushing non-existent lint off my lapel. "You disappeared." "I was just looking around," I replied, my voice smooth. "Ran into the Bowens. Had to listen to Charles's speech about his new golf swing." She chuckled. "That sounds riveting." And just like that, she slipped her hand into mine. Her skin was warm, familiar, deceptive. I squeezed gently, not because I meant it, but because I wanted her to feel safe for now. She didn't know I'd seen the receipt. She didn't know I'd held the parking ticket in my palm. She didn't know I'd watched her laugh with him like I didn't exist. And she definitely didn't know I saw the lipstick. But I did. And the difference between suspicion and truth is that once you cross that line, you can never go back. You can't unsee it. You can't unknow it. And you definitely can't forgive it while pretending you never knew. We stood there together, surrounded by music and lights and people who thought we were perfect. Her smile was effortless. Mine was controlled. She leaned into me slightly, performing, still believing she had the upper hand. I took a slow sip of my drink, nodding along to someone talking about their latest vacation. And all I could think was, you don't even know your time's running out. There's a strange kind of power in silence, when you know something someone else doesn't know you know. It fills the space between conversations like a second voice, one that only you can hear. Every smile becomes suspicious. Every sentence feels rehearsed. But the moment you react, that power vanishes. You show your cards. You give them time to recalibrate. So I didn't react. Not yet. I didn't pull Kelly aside. I didn't whisper accusations or cause a scene in the middle of the gala. I simply adjusted my cufflinks, asked her if she wanted another drink, and made a point to smile the way a husband might when he's genuinely proud of the woman beside him. I played my part. Perfectly. She leaned in, lips brushing my cheek, and said, "Thank you for coming tonight." A sweet gesture. On another night, it might have meant something. But tonight, all I could hear was the echo of her laugh while she stood with him, Ryan, and the quiet insult of that lipstick stain. I nodded. Of course. Wouldn't miss it. And that was true. I wouldn't miss it. I'd been waiting for this moment longer than I realized. We walked the room together, hand in hand, greeting couples we'd known for years, acquaintances from her job, people who only ever saw the two of us as a unit. Mr. and Mrs. Wells, that couple who always looked so put together, the ones who always RSVP'd early and smiled in Christmas cards. No one saw what I saw. No one noticed the subtle way Kelly's eyes darted toward the bar, or how Ryan slipped in and out of the crowd without ever crossing our path again. She was nervous, I could tell. She kept checking her phone, laughing a little too hard at nothing, sipping her wine faster than usual. Her arm stayed close to mine, like proximity could erase guilt. But guilt doesn't disappear when you pretend to be good. It festers. "I'm going to check on the auction," she said at one point. already halfway across the room before I could respond. I nodded, staying put. Letting her walk away felt like granting parole on a sentence she didn't realize she was serving. I gave her leash. She'd hang herself soon enough. While she slipped off, I approached the bar. Not because I needed a drink. I already had what I needed. I just wanted to see him, face to face. Not as a victim, not as a husband, as an observer. Ryan was leaning against the far corner, laughing with someone from the finance board. His jacket was off now, slung over the back of a chair, collar still faintly marked. He didn't look guilty. He looked comfortable, confident, like a man who believed his secret was safe. I watched him for a moment. Then I stepped forward, extended my hand. Ryan, right? He turned, caught off guard, but only for a second. Hey, Jason, right? Kelly's husband. That's me. We shook hands. Firm grip. His eyes flickered, just a moment's hesitation, like he was trying to read whether I knew. Didn't think you'd make it tonight, he added, smiling. Wouldn't miss it, I said again. It's important to Kelly. He nodded, sipping his bourbon. She's been a huge part of organizing this thing. I've heard. I glanced around. She's got a good eye for detail. He smiled wider. Too wide. Then I looked down, pointed casually to his collar. Lipstick, I said, my tone flat. He froze. His hand moved instinctively toward his neck. He rubbed at the spot, eyes narrowing. Ah, weird. Must have been from someone I hugged earlier, he muttered. Right? I said, letting the word hang. Happens. His smile cracked. Just a little. I gave him a friendly nod, as if nothing had passed between us, and walked away. He didn't follow. By the time I found Kelly again, she was near the silent auction table, laughing with a group of women from her firm. She caught sight of me and smiled. Too quickly, too eager, like she needed reassurance. I stepped beside her and placed a gentle hand on the small of her back. Everything okay? She asked, eyes searching mine. Perfect, I said. You look beautiful tonight. She blushed a little too hard. You clean up well yourself. I kissed her cheek. Not because I wanted to, but because I had to. We were still on stage. The curtain hadn't dropped yet. The speeches were scheduled for 9:30, just under an hour away. I knew the schedule by heart. Kelly had gone over it in the kitchen a dozen times that week. I remembered her words. You don't have to say anything during the toast. Just stand with me while I thank the donors. But I planned to say something. Oh, I had something to say. Before then, I moved through the room like a man at peace. I mingled. I clinked glasses. I spoke to Maya's friend, the event coordinator, and confirmed something I already suspected. Maya wasn't in Denver. She'd never RSVP'd. Her name wasn't on the guest list. So Kelly was lying about that too. More importantly, she didn't know I knew, which meant I still had time, and I intended to use every second of it. The longer I kept quiet, the more unsteady Kelly seemed to become. She laughed less, checked her phone more. Her eyes flicked toward Ryan when she thought I wasn't watching. She was unraveling herself, thread by thread. At one point, while I was speaking to an old college friend across the room, I saw her slip out through a side exit, alone. I waited a few beats before following. She stood in the hallway just past the restrooms, staring at her phone, typing furiously. I didn't interrupt. I just stood behind a pillar and watched. She didn't hear me. She was too busy erasing messages. When she finally returned to the ballroom, her smile was back in place, but her hands were shaking. Barely. But I noticed. I noticed everything now. By 9:15, the event coordinator was tapping the mic, asking people to begin moving toward the main stage for the closing speeches. Kelly turned to me, eyes bright. You ready? She asked. I nodded. Oh, and just remember, she added. We'll keep it short. I know you hate public speaking. I smiled gently. Yeah, just a few words. I could see the relief in her eyes. She had no idea what was coming. And the most damning part? Neither did Ryan. As I followed her toward the stage, past dozens of strangers clapping and chatting and taking their seats, I felt an eerie calm settle over me. Not rage, not sadness. Something deeper, sharper. She thought she'd gotten away with it. She thought the performance was enough. But performances end. And the spotlight? It reveals everything. There's a unique stillness in the moments before a public reckoning. Not silence. No, there was still the clink of glasses, the shuffling of chairs, the occasional burst of polite laughter, but a kind of suspended energy. Like the air itself was holding its breath, waiting for someone to break the tension. People were settling into their seats beneath the glittering chandeliers, glancing toward the podium, programs folded in their laps. Kelly stood next to me on the stage steps, her hand looped lightly through my arm, rehearsing her thank yous under her breath. Her posture was flawless, her face composed. She didn't look like a woman on the edge. She looked like the image of grace, devotion, poise. And that's what made it all the more surreal. Because standing there next to her, I didn't feel rage anymore, or betrayal, or heartbreak. I'd already walked through all that fire. Now I just felt ready. But even as I steadied myself for the reveal, for the moment that would tilt her carefully constructed world off its axis, I didn't expect what happened next. From across the ballroom, a hush fell. Not sudden, but creeping like a wave. Conversations dimmed. Heads turned. The door at the far end had opened, and stepping through it, gliding as if the room belonged to her, was Maya. And for the first time that evening, Kelly's grip on my arm faltered. Maya had always been more myth than memory in our marriage. A name Kelly dropped with quiet venom. Someone I dated briefly years before I met her. A college friend who had once crashed on our couch during a road trip. To Kelly, Maya had always been the threat she couldn't quite define. A woman she claimed didn't respect boundaries, even though Maya and I had never crossed any lines. But it didn't matter. In Kelly's eyes, Maya represented something she couldn't control. And now here she was in the flesh, elegant, composed. A black satin gown that clung to her like it had been sewn for the moment. She didn't wear flashy jewelry, just a single silver chain and her natural confidence. Heads turned as she passed, not because she was loud or showy, but because she carried the kind of quiet authority that demanded attention. Kelly's nails dug into my sleeve. "What is she doing here?" she hissed, her voice low and sharp. "She's on the guest list," I replied, feigning mild surprise. "Didn't you say she wasn't in town?" She wasn't supposed to be," Kelly said, stumbling over her words for the first time all evening. "You invited her?" "No," I lied smoothly. "She must have heard about the gala through the foundation." Kelly's mouth opened, then closed. Her eyes locked on Maya as she crossed the floor with that same steady rhythm. Slow, deliberate steps that made the room feel like it was tilting ever so slightly toward her. And then Maya saw me. Her eyes met mine with a flicker of something unspoken. Not flirtation, not smugness, just recognition, awareness, maybe even a question. "Are you really going to do it?" I gave the smallest nod, and Maya, bless her, smiled. I don't know if she came out of loyalty or curiosity or something more complicated. We hadn't seen each other in years. No flirty texts, no lingering emotional baggage. Just one of those rare human connections that stay intact, even with time and distance. She didn't know the details, but when I called her earlier that week and said, "If you're free Friday, I'd like you to be at the gala," she didn't hesitate. And now here she was, a living symbol, and Kelly was unraveling. "Jason," she whispered, her voice suddenly brittle. "Why is she really here? You're the one who always said Maya had a bad habit of showing up where she's not wanted," I said, just loud enough for her to hear. "Maybe she's here for closure." Kelly turned away, pretending to focus on the MC now tapping the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," the voice boomed, "thank you for joining us tonight. We're honored by your generosity and commitment to the foundation. Please welcome Kelly Wells, head of the planning committee, and her husband, Jason Wells, to say a few words before our closing ceremony." Applause filled the room. I straightened my jacket, stepped up to the mic with Kelly beside me, and looked out over a sea of smiling faces. And there she was, Maya, seated dead center, legs crossed, hands in her lap, eyes fixed on us like a quiet challenge. She didn't smile. She didn't blink. She just watched. Kelly cleared her throat and started the speech. It was the one she'd practiced all week. Smooth, grateful, predictable. She thanked the donors, named the sponsors, gave a quick recap of the year's fundraising milestones. The crowd nodded along. I stood quietly beside her, listening. Not to her words, but to the tone behind them. The rehearsed inflections. The places where her voice cracked ever so slightly. She was no longer thinking about her speech. She was thinking about Maya. And about me. When she wrapped up with a generic, "Thank you for believing in this cause," she turned toward me, offering a cue that I wasn't supposed to take. I was only supposed to smile, nod, maybe say a polite word or two. But I took a step forward. She didn't stop me. I gripped the microphone gently, looked down at the note card she had written for me, the talking points she expected me to follow. Then I slid the card into my jacket pocket and pulled something else out instead. An envelope. The same envelope I'd found in her purse earlier that evening. And suddenly, the room quieted again. I wasn't planning on speaking tonight. I began, keeping my voice level. But sometimes moments arrive that demand a little honesty. I held up the envelope. "This," I said, turning it in the light, "is from Dahlia and Pine. 2 entrees, 1 shared bottle of wine, a dessert. Not a huge deal by itself. Romantic, sure, but not suspicious." I paused. The room shifted, people leaning in, confused. Except my wife told me she was working late that night, that she was too exhausted for dinner. Except this receipt was hidden in the bottom of her purse. Kelly's eyes were wide now, frozen, her face pale. I set the envelope down on the podium. 2 nights before that, there was a parking ticket. Lakeside Grove, a place she swore she never visited. Time-stamped just before midnight. Her car, her coat. I found the slip while grabbing her things for tonight. The room was dead quiet. I ignored it, like I've ignored a lot of things lately. New routines, locked phones, changed passwords, strange perfume on clean clothes. All of it small, excusable until you string them together. I turned slightly toward Kelly now, not to confront, not to accuse, but to address. "You didn't have to confess. Because tonight, I saw him. I didn't say his name. I didn't need to. Lipstick on his collar. The same color you wore. The same laugh I heard from across the ballroom." Kelly's hands trembled at her sides. Her breathing was shallow. And Maya? Still watching. Still waiting. "I won't say more," I said softly. "I just think that if we're going to spend evenings celebrating honesty, generosity, and integrity, then maybe we should start at home." I stepped back. The silence was so heavy it hurt. Then someone stood. Maya. She didn't clap. She just nodded. Kelly turned toward me, stunned. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. And then, as if he knew the show was over, Ryan slipped out through the side door. Coward. I left the stage without another word. And I knew nothing would ever be the same again. As I stepped off stage, the crowd remained silent, stunned. Kelly stood frozen under the lights, clutching the mic with trembling fingers. Ryan was gone. Guests murmured, shifting uncomfortably. She tried to speak but couldn't. I didn't wait. I walked out, past the whispers, past the wreckage. Let her explain the unexplainable. Her mask had cracked, and everyone had seen the truth behind it. Kelly came home late, shattered, mascara streaked. She begged, tears, apologies, denial. But I had made my choice. The guest room was hers now. In days that followed, I cleared drawers, erased photos, scrubbed the past. Maya stayed close, not to replace but to remind. Healing is possible. The silence in the house felt different now. Less like grief, more like freedom.